Good afternoon, Chani and friends, and welcome to this week's episode of Patio Ponderings. I'm Pastor Sue, and my patio today is out on a neighboring farm right next to this ginormous tree stump. And it's actually not a bad day out here. There's no wind, relatively warm. I can do this week. So one of my favorite things to do is to read the worship notes that our confirmation age kids do every week. And there's always a space on those notes where the kids can ask their questions. And they are so good at asking questions about faith and about the Bible stories. And sometimes the questions are big and deep, and sometimes they're really serious, and sometimes they're more lighthearted. This week, one of the questions asked, though, I just found kind of interesting. It's one of those things that we never think to address, but is really important to the story. And somebody was wondering, what is Jesse's stump and why is it in the Bible? Now, the verse that this comes from is in our Isaiah reading that we had this week, Isaiah chapter 11, verse 1, that a shoot will grow up from the stump of Jesse, and a branch will sprout from its roots. So Jesse is part of the genealogy of Jesus, and a few weeks ago we went through that whole genealogy, and then it showed up in our Isaiah reading this week. Jesse is the father of King David, and the promise of God was always that the Messiah would come out of the line of King David. So Jesse is an ancestor of Jesus. And so we've talked a lot about the family tree of Jesus and all the stories on that. But that's what's so interesting about this image, is that Jesse isn't in the family tree. Jesse is a stump. And I got to thinking about that. A stump is a dead tree, basically, right? It's a tree that has lost its fullness, a tree that has lost its purpose. It no longer provides shade, or in the case of a fruit tree, it's no longer producing its fruit. The wood in it is spent, so it's no longer producing wood for building or firewood. And I think what this is about, what I know this is about, is that there are so many times in the span of generations before Jesus is born in which the promise of God seems to be dead, that there just doesn't seem to be a way forward for what God has promised to come to fruition. And so we get this great image of a stump with a sprout coming out of it, that even amidst the death of this tree, there's new growth that's coming forward. And isn't that what Jesus is all about, right? The death on the cross, and we think the promise is over, and yet there's the resurrection of Jesus to come. And we see this even in the story of Mary that we had this week when we refer to Elizabeth. Elizabeth was an old woman. She had never been able to have children. There was no life in her womb. And yet, God brought forth life. John the Baptist is that child that Elizabeth was pregnant with in her old age. So this becomes a recurring theme, that even when there's no hope, even when the promises of God seem to have come to a dead end, that God can still work out of that life still comes out of death. And so what I would invite you to ponder this week is to think about, what is a time in your life where you thought there was no hope, and yet something new came out of that death or that loss? And also, I'd like you to think and to look around in your life today. Is there a place in your life where you had hope for something or for someone, and there just doesn't seem to be a way? Can you hold out hope? Because as the angel Gabriel tells Mary, that for God, nothing is impossible. Well, thanks for joining me this week. I would love to hear what you are pondering as we are hearing the stories of Jesus' ancestors, of the key figures in Jesus' birth story, Mary and Joseph and Elizabeth. What are you pondering? I'd love to hear. And have a wonderful day, and I will see you on Sunday. Bye.